Ben 10 is one of the most ambitious animated universes ever created, spanning 4 series, 228 episodes, and over a decade of continuous storytelling. What started as a kid finding a weird watch on a camping trip evolved into a full-scale intergalactic war saga. So today, I'm breaking down the entire story of Ben 10 from beginning to end, starting with a summer vacation that went very, very sideways. The Watch. Here's the thing about Ben Tennyson. He was 10 years old, stuck on a cross-country road trip with his grandpa Max and his cousin Gwen, and he was bored out of his mind. No friends, no video games, just the open road and 2 relatives he wasn't thrilled about spending an entire summer with. The kid had 0 ambitions beyond surviving the trip without losing his mind. Then a pod crashed out of the sky like a meteor, landed about 30 feet from his campsite, and inside was a device that immediately latched onto his wrist like it had been waiting for him. The Omnitrix. Within seconds of contact, Ben transformed into his first alien form. No manual, no training, no warning. Just a terrified 10-year-old suddenly on fire and screaming. And here's where it gets interesting. The Omnitrix wasn't a weapon. It was never designed to be one. A Galvan scientist named Asmuth built it as a tool for intergalactic understanding, a device containing alien DNA samples meant to let species experience life as other species. Walk a mile in someone else's exoskeleton, basically. It initially held only 10 accessible forms, with more unlocking over time as Ben demonstrated maturity and experience. The device even had built-in safety protocols. Dangerous species like the ectoneurites, ghost-like aliens capable of possessing other beings, were locked behind experience gates. Asmuth didn't want some random kid accidentally unleashing a parasitic nightmare on an unsuspecting planet, which is exactly what would have happened, because Ben treated the Omnitrix like a toy from day one. He couldn't even pick which alien he wanted. He'd slam the dial hoping for one form and get something completely different. He used it to prank people, show off, and settle petty arguments with Gwen. This was not a responsible wielder of universe-altering technology. This was a child with a loaded weapon and 0 impulse control. But that recklessness wasn't just character flavor. It was the entire moral foundation of the franchise. Ben's arc across every series comes back to one question. Does having power mean you deserve it? At 10 years old, the answer was absolutely not. He had the DNA of 1 million species on his wrist, and the emotional maturity of a golden retriever with a tennis ball. But Vilgax didn't care about Ben's maturity level, and neither did the other threats already heading toward Earth. Vilgax and Kevin 11, every hero is defined by their villains, and Ben Tennyson got 2 that perfectly represent every threat he'd face for the next decade. One was an alien warlord, the other was a kid his own age, and together they established a question the franchise would never stop asking. Vilgax is, put simply, a nightmare. This guy commanded a flagship stretching 1.2 kilometers long, housing 12,000 elite soldiers ready to die for his cause. He wasn't some mustache-twirling cartoon villain with a vague plan. He wanted the Omnitrix because he understood exactly what it could do as a conquest weapon, and he launched 3 major invasions across Classic trying to rip it off Ben's wrist. Every time Ben beat him, he came back stronger, meaner, and more obsessed. He's the kind of villain where you hear his name and the music changes. Pure existential dread wrapped in alien muscle. But here's the thing. Vilgax was terrifying. Sure, he was also impersonal. He didn't hate Ben. He hated that Ben was in the way. Kevin Levin was the opposite of that in every possible sense. Kevin was 11 years old when he absorbed energy directly from the Omnitrix, and the result was genuinely horrific. His body mutated into an amalgam of all 10 alien DNA samples, twisting him into something that was essentially Ben's power gone wrong. He became a Kevin 11, the first villain who functioned as a dark mirror. Same age, same potential, worse outcome. Where Ben got a cool watch and a supportive family, Kevin got unstable powers and nobody looking out for him. And that's not just sad backstory for flavor. It created real emotional stakes. Fighting Vilgax felt like saving the world. Fighting Kevin felt like watching someone fall apart. Now, a common misconception is that Kevin's mutation was a permanent death sentence, with 0 hope from the start. But the show never fully closed that door. Kevin's ability to absorb energy in the first place meant his mutation was tied to what he took in, not some irreversible genetic collapse, which means redemption was always theoretically on the table. The writers left that thread dangling, even if it wouldn't pay off for years. Together, these 2 villains established the franchise's entire threat taxonomy. Vilgax is the alien conqueror who sees Ben as an obstacle to be removed. Kevin is the human rival who sees Ben as proof that life is unfair. One makes you fear for Ben's survival. The other makes you wonder if the monster deserves saving. That tension between destruction and redemption would define every season that followed. And when Ben finally grew up and the Omnitrix evolved with him, Both of these dynamics came back in ways nobody expected. Ben 10, Alien Force, 5 years. That's how long the show waited before completely reinventing itself. And honestly, it worked way better than it had any right to. When Alien Force picks up, Ben is 15, the Omnitrix is back on his wrist, and Grandpa Max is gone. Not dead, just missing, which in this franchise is somehow worse because it means something took him. The entire tone of the show shifted overnight. Gone was the road trip cartoon about a kid zapping aliens in national parks. In its place was a serialized sci-fi drama where the stakes were genuinely apocalyptic. Some fans hated it, but for the audience that had aged 5 years alongside Ben, it felt exactly right. The big threat this time was the hybrid, and they weren't messing around. We're talking 10,000 genetically identical soldiers deployed across 78 planets, systematically wiping out any species they deemed impure. Earth was their final target. Their endgame was complete genetic purification of the galaxy, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets complicated. The hybrid weren't evil in the way Vilgax was evil. They were dying. Their obsession with genetic purity had destroyed their own gene pool, and rather than adapt, they decided to take every other species down with them. It's a villain motivation that the original series never would have attempted. Desperate extinction rage instead of cartoon megalomania. The resolution involved Ben using the Omnitrix to forcibly diversify their DNA, saving the species against their will. Whether that's heroic or deeply messed up depends on who you ask. Meanwhile, Kevin Levin came back. Not as a villain, as an ally. The kid who tried to kill Ben at age 11 was now riding shotgun in his car, dating his cousin, and fighting alongside him every week. His redemption arc had been hinted at across the entire original series, and Alien Force finally paid it off. The trio of Ben, Gwen, and Kevin became the definitive team of the franchise, and Kevin's shift from antagonist to protective older brother figure is genuinely one of the best long-game character arcs in animated television. Nobody saw it coming in 2005. By 2008, it felt inevitable. Gwen's powers got a complete overhaul, too. Turns out she wasn't doing magic at all. She was an Anodyte, a being of pure energy, and her abilities were genetic rather than mystical. Her grandmother, Verdona, showed up to explain that Gwen could abandon her physical form entirely and become pure mana. She refused, obviously, but the revelation recontextualized everything she'd done in Classic. Every spell, every glowing hand, every unexplained moment of power. It was never magic. It was always in her blood. Ben himself evolved past the kid who hid behind the watch. The Omnitrix expanded to over 50 alien forms, but more importantly, Ben stopped treating it like a secret. He publicly embraced being a hero. No more pretending to be normal. No more reluctance. He was Ben 10, and he owned it. But if you think saving one dying alien race was complicated, wait until Ben gets his hands on a device that can evolve his aliens into their theoretical ultimate forms. Because that power, it comes with a cost nobody warned him about. Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. The Ultimatrix is one of the most interesting devices in the franchise because it wasn't built by a genius trying to unite the galaxy. It was built by a guy having a tantrum. Albedo, Ben's doppelganger who got stuck in human form, reverse-engineered the Omnitrix into something meaner, louder, and way less stable. His whole philosophy was simple. If the Omnitrix lets you become aliens, why not force those aliens to evolve further? Push them past their natural limits into ultimate forms. More power, more destruction, more everything. No safety protocols, no ethical considerations, just raw escalation for its own sake. And on paper, that sounds like a straight upgrade. But here's the thing. Ultimate forms weren't just stronger versions of the same alien. They were unstable genetic mutations, artificially accelerated evolution crammed into a body that was never designed for it. The Ultimatrix simulated millions of years of worst-case scenario evolution in seconds, producing creatures built for nothing but survival and violence. Every time Ben went ultimate, he was rolling the dice on psychological corruption. The alien's mind could bleed into his. Their survival instincts, their aggression, their complete disregard for anything resembling restraint. That's why Ben used them sparingly. Not because he didn't want the power, but because the power wanted things from him in return. And Albedo proved exactly what happens when you don't show that restraint. He's basically the cautionary tale walking around in Ben's face, literally wearing it. Every time he showed up, he was a little more degraded, a little more unstable, a little further from the person he used to be, which is, a great thing to watch happen to someone using the same device strapped to your wrist. But the Ultimatrix wasn't even the biggest problem that season. Ultimate Egregor was. This Osmosian warlord absorbed 5 aliens from the Andromeda Galaxy one by one, turning the entire first half of the series into a slow burn chase across multiple planets. The team wasn't fighting a monster of the week. They were losing a war of attrition against someone who planned everything in advance. Every time they showed up, Agrigor was already gone, already stronger, already one step closer to becoming functionally unstoppable. His endgame was absorbing the power of a baby celestial sapient, which would have made him basically omnipotent. No big deal. Meanwhile, Ben's dealing with something no previous series ever touched. Everyone knows who he is now. He's not hiding behind a watch anymore. He's Earth's known protector, which sounds cool until you realize that means accountability. Press conferences, public opinion, people blaming him when things go wrong, kids looking up to him when he's not sure he deserves it. The fame doesn't come with a manual, and Ben handles it about as well as you'd expect a teenager to handle sudden global celebrity status. And that pressure broke something in him. Ultimate Alien is where Ben starts making decisions that genuinely alienate his friends. Not villain stuff, but morally gray calls that prioritize results over principles. The kind of choices where you win the fight, but lose something else. Gwen and Kevin both pulled away at different points because they couldn't recognize the person making those calls. Here's where it gets complicated. The show never tells you Ben was wrong, not definitively. It just shows you the cost. It shows you Kevin's face when Ben suggests something ruthless. It shows you Gwen choosing to walk away rather than enable it. And it lets you sit with that discomfort without resolving it into a neat lesson. This is the franchise at its darkest. Ben's not fighting to save the world from some external threat half the time. He's fighting to not become Albedo, to not become the guy who justifies everything because the Ultimatrix says he can. The power is right there, always available, always whispering that the ends justify the means, which is, not ideal when you're 16. But if Ultimate Alien showed us Ben at his most fallible, Omniverse was about to show us something completely different. Ben 10, Omniverse. Omniverse is the series that half the fan base calls a masterpiece, and the other half pretends doesn't exist. And honestly, both sides have a point. Here's the thing. After Ultimate Alien wrapped up its tight, serialized storytelling, Omniverse looked at all that focused narrative structure and said, what if we just didn't do that? Instead, the series went wide, impossibly wide. We're talking over 70 distinct alien forms, dozens of new species, and storylines that bounce across multiple established timelines like a pinball machine designed by someone who really, really liked Doctor Who. But before we get into the multiverse stuff, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Kevin and Gwen are gone. Well, not gone. They show up occasionally. But Ben's new partner is Rook Blanco, a by-the-book plumber who takes everything literally and follows protocol like his life depends on it. Which, to be fair, it usually does. The dynamic works because Ben has spent 3 entire series becoming increasingly improvisational and cocky, so pairing him with someone who responds to sarcasm with genuine confusion is, actually kind of perfect. Now, the multiverse.omniverse didn't just hint at alternate dimensions, it kicked the door down and revealed that there are countless Omnitrix variants existing across alternate realities. The show established that somewhere out there, different versions of Ben are having different bad days all at once. The show used this framework to do something genuinely clever. By establishing that every timeline matters, every version of Ben matters, it retroactively made the entire franchise more significant. Classic Ben's adventures didn't get overwritten. They became one thread in an infinite tapestry. But here's where it gets complicated. The Rogues Gallery in Omniverse reached its absolute fullest form, and some of these villains operate on scales that make Vilgax look like a guy who lost a parking dispute, Eon, a time-manipulating villain whose attacks span centuries of compressed time. Not across episodes, across actual in-universe chronology. He's not fighting Ben in one era. He's fighting every version of Ben simultaneously across different points in history, which is, not ideal for anyone involved. Then there's Malware, a mechamorph gone wrong who doesn't just consume technology, he corrupts and absorbs it on a terrifying scale. He's essentially a virus that threatened everything the Omnitrix connected to, and the show treats him with genuine menace, giving him a personal grudge against Ben that predates the entire series. And Benzaro, an alternate dimension Ben where everything went wrong. Corrupted Omnitrix, corrupted mind, corrupted everything. He's the definitive answer to what if Ben turned evil, and the answer is everyone dies. And it smells terrible. Probably. They don't confirm the smell part, but I'm reading between the lines. The series also functions as a love letter to the franchise's history in ways that reward longtime viewers. Classic-era villains return. Timeline gaps get filled. Cosmic lore expands in directions nobody expected. Episodes jump between young Ben and current Ben, between alternate futures and deleted pasts, treating the entire franchise built since 2005 as a sandbox rather than a linear story. Was it always successful? No. The anthology format means some episodes feel disconnected. The tonal whiplash between a goofy filler episode and a multiverse-shattering event can give you narrative vertigo. The animation style divided people before a single episode aired, but the ambition is undeniable. Omniverse asked what the Omnitrix truly is, not as a weapon, not as a tool, but as a concept that exists across infinite realities, and then actually tried to answer that question. Whether it stuck the landing depends entirely on what you wanted from the show. If you wanted Ultimate Aliens-focused drama, you left disappointed. If you wanted the wildest, most creative alien designs and the deepest lore the franchise ever produced, Omniverse delivered that in excess. And regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, what the franchise built over its entire run is something nobody can argue with. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now, What the Franchise Built. Here's something that almost never happens in animation. A character who starts as a reckless 10-year-old kid treating alien powers like a video game actually grows up. Not in a montage, not in a time skip recap. Across 4 series and over a decade of continuous storytelling, the Prime Timeline is one of the longest unbroken character arcs in animated television history, and it earned every single year of that runtime. Ben 10 generated billions in merchandise revenue. The franchise reached global syndication across dozens of markets, became a genuine cultural touchstone, and still pulls massive nostalgia engagement years after the original series ended. Those aren't just reruns cycling through cable packages. That's a franchise that embedded itself into an entire generation's identity. But here's the thing, none of that matters if the story doesn't land, and it lands. By the end of Omniverse, the Omnitrix contained access to over 1 million DNA samples from across the galaxy. That's the completed version Azimuth always intended. Every sentient species in the database, accessible to one guy from Bellwood, New Jersey. The sheer scope of that power is absurd, but what matters is how Ben's relationship with it changed. Let me explain why that arc hits different. Ben chose not to destroy the Omnitrix. He had every reason to. The thing nearly killed him dozens of times, attracted every psychopath in the galaxy to Earth, and turned his childhood into a war zone. Any reasonable person would have chucked it into the sun and called it a day. Instead, he grew into what Azimuth always wanted the wielder to be. Not a weapon, a diplomat, a bridge between species. The Omnitrix was never designed as a combat tool. Azimuth built it so the user could literally walk in another species' skin and develop empathy across genetic lines. Ben spent 3 series treating it like a punch dispenser before finally understanding its actual purpose. It's a direct callback to Season 1. 10-year-old Ben slapped the dial and hoped for the best. He treated every transformation like pulling a slot machine lever. Oh cool, I got heat blast. Let me set something on fire. Zero consideration for consequences. Zero understanding of what these alien species actually represented. Ben maturing into someone who used the Omnitrix the way Azimuth intended is the show looking at its own premise and saying, nobody should have this much power without understanding what it means. Which is, the entire thesis of the show stated through character growth rather than a speech. And that's what makes this franchise genuinely remarkable. Not the alien designs, not the action sequences, not even the billions in toy sales. It's that the story was always about one thing, growing into responsibility rather than accumulating power. Ben didn't end the series as the strongest version of himself. He ended it as the most complete. He went from a kid who complained about getting gray matter instead of forearms to someone who understood that the Omnitrix's purpose was understanding, not domination. The walking arsenal became a peacekeeper. Not because the watch changed, but because he did. 4 series. 1 completed character arc that most live-action franchises with 10 times the budget never achieve. The Prime Timeline didn't just tell a superhero story, it told a story about what happens after you stop being reckless with power and start being responsible with it. Not all animated franchises get to finish their sentence. Ben 10 did, and the final word was restraint. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.